The conversation from, the perceived price war between the Dangote refinery and the NNPCL. Earlier this, late February, the Dangote refinery reduced the price of their commodity from about 895 naira to about 825, if memory serves me correctly. And just a week later, the NNPCL had to follow suit. What would you say is the causative factor for this constant price drop since the Yuletide season by the Dangote refinery? And it looks like it keeps forcing the hand of the NNPCL.
Okay, so the number of factors that are affecting the price of the nations as we see it. The first is we need to understand the overall trend, which is a downward trend in price, and that could only be possible because we have declining crude prices, we have stable exchange rates, which means that the speculative effects on the prices are getting lower. We also have the Dangote refinery, for example, having a tank-top situation, and the tank-top situation is basically where the Dangote refinery has produced to a level that is equating almost 100% of its storage capacity. And so it must give out that PMS, even though on a discounted basis, to make sure that people take it out. Because that's a cheaper way to go around it than to reach a tank top and have to take a shutdown. That's the third, thing that has happened. But the fourth and the most important one that has happened in the industry of late is the fact that each time the Dangote sets a price, the international marketers who are importing into Nigeria will bring a counter price and say, look, we can give the domestic marketers this price. And a lot of things have changed in the past. When the Dangote refinery was selling the prices above 900, those guys said, look, we could give you at 899.50 naira, and we would be able to give the local marketers at that price. We'd also be able to give them the terms to pay back in naira, and we'll also allow them to take the PMS, sell it, and then make returns later on. So these preferential terms that the international marketers are bringing every now and then means that the Dangote refinery is always going to be on its toe to be able to match those terms. And one way to do that is to do a downward price review. So just as a price, just as a reflection, the things that are driving down the prices are the competition between the domestic refineries and the international refineries, cognizant of the fact that we still have the import licenses active. The second is the stable, the stable exchange rate, which is at about 1,500 at the moment. The third is the downward review in crude prices, as we've seen in the time frame, just immediate time frame now. And the fourth is the fact that the Dangote refinery is reaching a tank top situation. Now, you ask, why is that looking like a price war between the Dangote refinery and the NNPCL? Well, the issue is this. The Dangote refinery, as far as volume is concerned, is the governing case when it comes to crude refining in Nigeria. And there is no market that is going to be willing to buy from the NNPCL if the Dangote refinery, which even produces more by volume, is selling for less. So you would find out that whenever the Dangote refinery drops their pricing for the four reasons I have mentioned, the NNPCL will follow suit because, of course, the governing case in Nigeria's domestic refining market, as far as petroleum products are concerned, is the Dangote refinery.
Okay, these are really, strong, back-end explanations as to what exactly is happening. So we are also saying that the international oil play is having a really strong impact on what is happening domestically. Why? My other question would of its refinery. We're talking Warri and Port Harcourt refinery at the moment, and then there is the Dangote refinery, which you've already alluded to, that is literally almost at a 100% capacity refining. So it therefore means that we have enough commodity in the country. But why are we still seeing that dependence on importation?
Okay, so I mean, you're definitely right. Case that I've argued before on national TV, and I've said to the country that look, I think the import licenses. So this is what the NMDPRS said. The NMDPRS says that the import licenses are meant to fulfill part of the demand that the Dangote cannot fulfill. So what they've said is that Nigeria consumes 50 million liters a day, for which I actually queried that number, and that Dangote can only produce 35 million liters of PMS per day, and that they need imports to be able to make up the little, the variants that, that we haven't been able to really, sort out domestically. Now, the issue that I have with that is, if that were true, then the Dangote refinery will be struggling to even try and catch up. But as we speak, the Dangote refinery has about 30 days worth of production, which equates to about 600 billion naira, and it has been unable to sell it. So it's actually at a, when I mean tanked off situation, it literally has inventory that it has produced for 30 days stored in a tank and not been able to evacuate it because no one is coming to buy it. Hence, it has to discount it. So the question there, the rhetorical question there is the are the licenses really because we have a need and a gap in terms of commodity supply, or are they being used as a joker for price checking the Dangote refinery? So to make sure that they don't increase their prices and create a monopoly, there's always these import licenses that definitely we can have local marketers say, look, if your prices are too expensive compared to the imported variant, we will go for the imported variant. That way, there's always this sort of price check on the Dangote refinery. That's what I think that the licenses are for. I don't believe that the licenses are for actually meeting the product supply, sort of challenge. Otherwise, we will not have a tank top situation worth over 600 billion naira at the Dangote refinery.
A little bit to the international oil price. We've seen that oil price globally has slipped by 1%, and the federal government of Nigeria, and that should be in light of the current US-China trade war, which are like the basic heavyweights behind oil, exports, imports, and the like. 1% slip means that Nigeria is standing on a risky brink, because we had projected for the 2025 budget that the oil price would be at about $75 per barrel, and that was what we were estimating our crude oil our budgetary activity on. Now that it has slipped, and we may see that this slip will further continue, because the trade war that the United States is necessitating is just about getting started. Where does this leave Nigeria, especially in light of our budget?
All right, I mean, you're obviously spot on. There is a concern that our budget is going to have issues, and this is where you see Nigeria trying to make up. So there are two major components when you come to our budget: the level of production and the price of the crude. You need to understand that we have very little control on the price of crude, because that is determined internationally. But that being said, the commonly quoted price of crude isn't the grade that Nigeria is producing. Nigeria is producing the Bonny Light for the most part, and so that means it is obviously a much better variant, so selling at a much higher price. But coming back to what you've asked, the question you've asked, the only joker in the pack is for Nigeria to either become more frugal in its budget execution, cognizant of the fact that there might be a valid scenario where we don't meet our budget, the fundamentals leading to our budget estimations. The second thing is for us to ramp up production, which we are assiduously achieving at the moment, and ramp it up above the number that was used as the estimation basis for our budgeting. So those are the two kind of joker in the park. Anything short of that, we'll be running around looking. We'll either have unexecuted projects or we'll be running around looking for a way to get money to to be able to fund the shortfall from our budgets.
These are strong concerns of which Nigerians would question of Nigeria thinking that swiftly on their feet, because we might be seeing maybe the oil prices may come down to as far back as $70 per barrel. Because if I remember President Donald Trump's inaugural speech, he had made mention of the fact that the United States had enough crude oil in reserve to serve them a very long time, and they were looking, to go back into production themselves. So it means that, the oil market has a very steep competition coming. But a quick question there before we move forward is, with all of this price slash going on, especially in the Nigerian market, is there possibility that we may see the pump price of petroleum products coming further down than it currently is?
Oh, yeah, definitely. As I said, just to remind your viewers, the four critical determinants of the pricing currently are the exchange rate stability, the reducing crude prices, the tank top situation that the Dangote refinery are at the moment, and I think I've forgotten the fourth one, but there were four in number. And yeah, the international competition from the the marketers, the global marketers that are importing. Now, the issue there is if the international marketers respond again with a better offer, the Dangote refinery is going to be in a situation where it risks losing market share, where people are going to turn to the importers and get their crude and their PMS supply. So he may have to, react with a much, a much more favorable, from a price standpoint, offer. That's one. Now, two is that if the crude prices keep declining and the Dangote refinery has to buy new crude feedstock, it would have to actually, reduce their prices again. So, I mean, those two is enough to really drive prices down if those realities begin to crystallize. I think right now, because the Dangote refinery knows that there is an active competition from the global importers, there's a very huge tendency for it to continue to want to check out ways to be able to optimize even its production from an economies of scale to make sure that the prices are always as low as possible so that consumers don't even have a reason, led by the major marketers, a reason to turn to the importers and ask for price quotes. So I think that consciousness is always going to allow us to get some good price benefits. But because of the declining crude prices, I'm very sure that the prices will decline even further. We haven't reached the list of it yet, but that's all good for consumers. The only bad part is that whilst it is good for the product consumers, it is bad for our federation funding, which is the kind of dilemma that we are at the moment.
That's serious, but then let's speak to the overtanking issue you alluded to with Dangote refinery. Dangote refinery is not only supplying locally; we know that it is exporting to other parts of the world, if not predominantly Africa. But I mean, it has a global reach at this time. Why then do we see that that overtanking is an issue when they are exporting?
Oh yeah, they're obviously exporting, but you need to understand that primarily, right? It's Dangote is a beneficiary of the crude for naira swap deal that we're currently running in Nigeria, and so whilst yes, hypothetically, he has the right to export, and then of course that's within his purview, but you also have to balance it with the ethics. If the company is looking at ethically, look, let's make sure Nigerian market is satisfied. We've gotten some crude from them and we've refined it and we promise to sell it in Nigeria or in Naira. Let's make sure they're satisfied. Let's make sure that everything is cool before we can export. And clearly they have a case because without, in reality, if all the import licenses, for example, are used for price bench check only, and there is really no active importation, then that tank top situation shouldn't be valid. And that's what I really believe, that we should have off takers. But now that they've discounted the price, I think they're getting down from the tank top situation. Is to answer your question correctly, they are primarily focused on fulfilling their end of the bargain from a crude for naira deal. But once that has been satisfied, then they can then export. Because again, you don't want the argument where people are saying that Dangote is taking Nigerian crude in naira and then exporting out to the international community. I think that's what the company is trying to balance ethically. Make sure that it can prove a case that no one is taking his crude, and rather than letting it spill over, it has to export it. But until then, it will continue to advocate for marketers to come in and pick that crude, pick the PMS, so that it can actually continue its production levels.
Hope that we can find a leveler for in the country pretty soon. Oil prices, of course, dipping globally, and it has a strong impact on the global play of oil at this time, especially for Nigeria that pegged its budget on certain projections of global oil price. But they're not guarantees with this thing. So how ready is Nigeria to address the issue? Of course, we have Dr. Wisdom Enang on the line, who is an energy expert, bringing us insight to the real play behind the scene. So, but let's talk about diversifying, our energy resource at this time. Now, if oil, as it's in and of itself, is going to be a problem, we know that you need to break down crude to several levels. You get different derivatives out of crude. What about diversifications within the energy sector that might boost up revenue for Nigeria?
Yeah, I mean, the diversification conversation is a very valid one, and definitely something that we have been at for a very long time. The issue is this: Belt LNG 7, for example, and that's going to be focused on the export market. So that's more earnings for us. But most of the diversification efforts right now are looking at domestic consumption of energy and industrialization. So whilst it might not lead to us getting foreign earnings in the immediate, it is actually, most of those efforts are geared out to improve Nigeria's infrastructure, improve Nigeria's GDP and all of that. So yes, there is some active, plans and concerted plans towards diversification, but I'm just trying to clear the air that the results you're going to see is less of FX earnings from an international standpoint, but it's going to be more of GDP growth from a domestic standpoint. But yes, there is that, we have realized the need to diversify, and also looking at energy consumption patterns. There's a lot more, kind of an increase in the consumption based on, for example, renewables at the moment. Most people are turning to solar, people are turning to gas, people are turning to hybrid electric vehicles and all of that across the various stratas of the society. Mostly people are turning to CNG, kind of retrofits to be able to run CNG vehicles. So those are all very laudable kind of changes in consumer behavior. But at the moment, it's more for improving our gross domestic products, but less at getting FX earnings. But maybe later on, it will be repurposed to get us FX earnings. But right now, it will only reflect in our GDP growth.
I will just wrap up there with regards to the conversation on energy. At this time, the price is falling, and maybe Nigerians are expecting, more fall with regards to the price. Hopefully, we can begin to buy. If we buy the petrol at 500 naira per liter, Dr. Enang, what do you think that would do for us? I know you've already spoken to the fact that it will affect us economically in terms of the budget, but I mean, a lot more Nigerians will be celebrating that we are buying the commodity at 500 naira. Is that even a mere possibility with the fall that is projected?
Oh no, except your exchange rate becomes 1,000, then it will be possible. If your exchange rate is determined its true value at 1,500, no, it's not possible.
So the exchange rate has a stronger impact on what the price of the commodity is than the global fall in the price of oil.
Oh, definitely. Because the exchange rate, for example, when it was at about 700, we're at about five something, 700, even till about 800, we're at 500 and something, and there was no subsidy and it was profitable. So, yes, most definitely. And that's because the crude prices, we don't expect them to fall to the kind of pandemic levels. We don't expect that. And the reason is because the various industrial economies are active, there's the energy demand, so it's not going to fall that bad, even if the US flood the market. That's one thing. But even the US flood the market, there's no telling the way the OPEC plus cartel are going to respond, because the prices are not just because the US threatens to flood the market. You know, if the US does that, the OPEC plus could cut their supply and tell the US, okay, send out your crude inventory at a cheap price. That's on you. We don't care. We're not going to do some. And when there's that cut from the OPEC plus supply, yes, they will lose market share, but the prices would stabilize at a much higher range. So it's all about the interaction between the not OPEC and the OPEC cartel, not just what the US does. So I do believe that the fall expected, and based on exponential basis that we know from crude price decline is nothing compared to what we can expect from our, the appreciation of our exchange rate. And we know that if those prices go to 1,000, yes, we're going to expect, the PMS to come to about 550 to 600. That's a possibility.
Our hopes have been dashed, so quickly this morning. It's hoping that that will come down, because do we have the economic inputs to see that the price of the naira appreciates against the dollar quickly back to 1,000 or even less than that? But let's quickly pick your mind before we wrap up the conversation this morning. The United States of America, as led by Donald Trump, has cut back on a lot of aid that it was sending around the world, and it's affecting key sectors across the economy, because we have a lot of families that were dependent on salaries that they were paid as US aid workers in Nigeria, for instance. But we see two key sectors, health and education, have come up to be grossly affected by the withdrawal of these US aid at the time. Do you think that the federal government of Nigeria, and I'd like to stretch that conversation to Africa also, do you think that we have positioned ourselves in such a way that we'll be able to address and cater to this enormous financial cutback by the United States of America?
I mean, to be honest, I don't think we had, planned it beforehand and expected that to happen, even though we knew that Trump's, policies were kind of protectionist in favor of the America, the Americans. Now, why do I say so? I think the federal government did do a supplementary budget at the time, just recently, including or marking a lot more funding for health, vaccines, and all of that. Meaning it was kind of a retrospective, reaction. But that being said, I do think that we might be able to repurpose some of our relationships with places like Germany and India to be able to allow us get things like those very critical vaccines at a much cheaper rate. But then there are some vaccines that are purely, maybe licensed under a company like, say, Pfizer and the rest. So we do not have that much of an option. We still need to get it perhaps through direct negotiations with the company, not through discount from the US aid as it used to be in the past. But there's still a huge level of dependency at the moment. Retroviral drugs are also top on the list because the US used to make it freely available, and now you've seen the huge budget that the federal government is trying to put in place to absorb even the cost of retroviral medicines and all of that. So it's a big concern. And again, it comes at a time where African nations are struggling to fund their budget. So it is a very big concern. I don't think any African countries was proactively ready for what was going to happen. But I think posterity is going to judge those countries based on how well they react to the reality at the moment.
Against Africa, of course, especially because we have not been proactive before now with how we are going about civilization. But it looks like the Sahel states, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, in light of their recent cessation, seem to have found a clear path for themselves. Burkina Faso, for instance, we see the coup leaders really, really working on redeveloping their economy and their peoples. And there's been a lot of, joy coming out of Burkina Faso, for instance. Do you think that, if we move a little bit away from depending on these aids, that Africa could think for itself and invest its economy because let's also go back to conversations about our natural resources. We are blessed with a vast majority of what the global West use in most of the manufacturing that they do. If we can leverage well, then Africa would do better economically and develop its nations.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's no gain saying that Africa has the possibility of kind of developing itself and being independent in the intentional. It's not about having the right leadership. It's not about having the right roadmap, and it's not about having the right stewardship on the roadmap that we draw. As you've drawn insights, Burkina Faso is doing very well. Again, unfortunately, we find that there's more flexibility, there's more speed achieved in those military regimes because the bureaucracy for decision making is not as much, and the cost of governance isn't as much. Unfortunately, for a democracy, there's always a lot of interest, and there's a lot of bureaucracies, and in the end, nothing gets done. 2 years down the line of any 2 years into any administration, we're already talking about re-elections. That doesn't really allow one to focus and really get the results that are required in it, in the kind of democracy we practice in this part of the in the African region. But the truth is, based on the realities on ground, I think we need to really catch up. Because, like you said, a lot of those military regimes who mean well for their people and they just have a single line of command to executing their plans are doing fantastically well, and they're doing it at a very fast pace. But yes, the reality is quite different for most bureaucratic democracies like we have in Nigeria. So yes, you're absolutely right, and we just need to find a way to operationalize our democracy in such a way that still gives us the level of results that would have if we had a very shorter chain of command and control.
Ramp up our work in Africa. Thank you so much, Dr. Wisdom Enang, for your time on Rise and Shine this morning. We've had serious perspective, especially to the energy conversation this morning. Nigerians would definitely know what to expect out of that sector. Thank you for your time on Rise and Shine.
Thank you very much. Do have a wonderful time.
And
God bless you.
God bless you too. Good morning. Well, strong conversations that we've had this morning. Is Africa really ready to take responsibility for its own development and civilization? That's a strong conversation. And for the developments that we are seeing out of the oil sector, global oil prices falling as a result of several indices, including the tariff wars about to begin between the United States, China, and several other countries of the world, and also the fact that the naira is not doing so well against the dollar, so the price of the commodity in Nigeria will also continue to shrivel back and forth between, the price of the dollar.